I got a question for you. How was your feast? That's what I get when I ask questions. That was kind of rhetorical. But anyway, Mr. Horchak asked a question at the feast, and I was thinking, okay, nobody's been answering out questions and different things, but he asked a question directly to me. He asked me a question, and I didn't know if it was rhetorical or not, and he kind of paused for a while, so I thought, okay, he wants an answer, so I yelled out an answer. So here I was blurting out answers, but it wasn't wrong of you guys to blurt out the answer. I didn't tell you this is a rhetorical question. So I'm glad that you guys had a good feast. I think that's kind of what I heard with the mumbled. It was not all in unison, but I'm thinking that's what you were saying. So did you ask anybody that question today? How was your feast? Did anybody ask you that question? What did you tell them? What did you tell them? If you could give 5 words, and I want you to write these down today, please. I know some of you may not have your pens handy. That's the thing about Unity Church. If you look right in front of you, there's a pen probably somewhere there. Find that pen or reach across your neighbor and get a pen if you don't have one, or use your computers. But if you could give 5 words, 5 single words or descriptors to summarize your feast experience this year, what would those 5 words be? You can multitask, so I want you to do this throughout the sermon. You may have those words down now. You may have 7 or 8 or 10 words, and then I want you, if you're that kind of a person, I want you to work those down by the end of the message, if you can, to about 5 words. Some of you that get asked a question like that and then ponder the greater questions of life, it may take you several days to come down to 5 words. I understand that if that's you. Take the time you need, but really try to be thinking about that today. They can be positive or negative. I want them to accurately reflect your experiences. They can be nouns, adjectives, adverbs, action verbs, but write them down. Write them down, just one word, descriptors. And after you write them, think about why these words came to mind. What events led that to happening? Did anything in particular occur during the feast which caused you to think of those words? Or were they just overall impressions as you think of the feast, boom, it just comes down to these certain descriptors that really embody the experience that you had? Were they a direct result of what you considered to be God's intervention for some of you? Did the words serve as consequences for experiences that you went through at the feast that were outside of your control? What about these words? To what degree did you play a part in each of those descriptors occurring? So I'm serious about this. I want you to write down those during the message today. Think about that. Facebook tells quite a lot about people. As we were sitting in our room that had Wi-Fi this feast, we were always getting on the web every day, trying to see if the family was posting something about what Christy was doing in Ireland, or our older daughter, Stacy. And if we could get any pictures that we could, we just latched onto them. But we also saw other posts on Facebook. And there was one fellow, his name will not be mentioned, of course, but he was talking about this particular feast site, and he said, I cannot believe that they would even begin to choose a site like this. It's been raining, it's been awful, it's a nightmare, pretty much is what he was saying. And then I saw another person's Facebook post from the same feast site. This place is beautiful. The rain has created just the greenery that's just, it's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable experience for us. Facebook does tell a lot about a person. It's interesting the things that people will post. I'm going to give you my 5 in a few minutes, but again, throughout the sermon, write yours down. Why are we doing this today? I want to talk about what we experienced and what we learned at the feast for several reasons, but let's turn to begin to introduce what we're trying to get at by going to a passage that I would be shocked if this passage was not read at the feast this year. Deuteronomy 14, as it talks about second tithe here in that passage, one of the more familiar, if not one of the most familiar verses that we in the church have read many, many, many times as we keep this time to reflect upon this as we exit the feast, as Mr. Burnett was talking. Deuteronomy 14, verse 22, he makes the statement of tithing, and in this case, he's talking about the second tithe, as is indicated here by verse 23. And you shall eat before the Lord your God in the place where he chooses to make his name abide. So a process goes through where individuals in the church have researched and prayed and asked for God's guidance, and then as things near the feast, we pick places to go, and then we gather around that, we plan around that, we give it all to God and focus on that feast about living and experiencing that as a foretaste of the coming world tomorrow. He says, so you do this in the place where he chooses to make his name abide, the tenth of your grain, your new wine, your oil, the firstborn of your herds. For what reason? We know this. We probably talked about at your site. It was talked about at our site, that you may learn to fear the Lord your God always. Why I want to go through what I want to go through today, in part, is to answer that question. Through this experience, have we learned to, in a greater way, have a deep awe and reverence of our Almighty Father in heaven and His Son, Jesus Christ? As you went to the place where the Eternal chose, did you eat before the Lord? Did you eat? I ate. I ate well. And ate a lot and enjoyed that. And also, as it says here, as you take the tithe which He's blessed you, and you can turn that into funds, and in verse 26, and spend that money for whatever your heart desires: oxen, sheep, wine, similar drink, stronger wine, fermented wines. For whatever your heart desires, you shall eat there before the Lord your God, and you shall rejoice, you and your household. We came and went to the place where God said, this is my tabernacle, this is my home here. Come into my home and learn more about me and my ways, and about what is the plan for mankind, and feed on that and rejoice. So did you do that this year? That's part of the reason why I would like for us to go through this exercise today. So did you grow in your deep reverence for God always through your experience this year? Did you eat? Did you rejoice with your family and friends? In one of the messages this feast, the pastor talked about the connection between, as you look at this passage, this obedience to God of taking second tithe and taking that and in faith and in obedience to God, going up before the Lord and keeping the feast. As we do that, as we obey God, as we have the faith to believe God is who He is, to take a tenth of the money that we make and save it for that and spend it all in a week, which is madness to many people. I explained that to some guys this week about what we do, and he's like, man, that's a lot of money. Yeah, it's a very great experience. He said, boy, you can probably do some things. I said, yeah, we do. It's really good. But anyway, it's just kind of shocking to people. But anyway, so the faith and the obedience and the blessings. Faith, obedience, blessings. You can interchange those. You can start with blessings, and as a result, that leads to faith and obedience. You can start with faith, and as a result of that faith, it follows through with obedience and blessings. You can start with obedience, and in that obedience, I'm understanding some things, I'm obeying, and as I obey, I begin to see the blessings that come as a result, and I grow in faith. They're all interchangeable, and you cannot pull out any of them. They all work together. So what was the outcome of your feast in this regard? What would your spouse say about her experience or his experience at the feast this year? What about your children? What have or what would your children say, if you haven't asked them yet? Did they rejoice? Did they grow in their reverence for God? Well, what was their experience? No matter what the child's age, at that child's level, what was that child's response? For us, it was a very different feast. We didn't have Christy with us, and I calculated this. Unfortunately, I didn't do this previous to my message at the feast, and I couldn't remember how long we had been married, but I did it before today. So we've been married for 29 years, and our first 3 feasts that we kept were without kids. And since that time, we've always had kids. This was our first year to keep the feast as husband and wife without kids. It was different. It was different. It was enjoyable, but it was different. We're just so used to having that dynamic of the 3 of us or the 4 of us for all those years that it was a different kind of feast. We ate out more. Lisa and I don't eat out that much in normal day-to-day activities. So New Braunfels had several chain restaurants that they had BJ's. I don't know if any of you have been to BJ's. And we got really excited. There was a BJ's, a Chili's, and an Outback. And for us, that's pretty big time for the feast. So we went to BJ's 3 times, 2 times. I got the triple chocolate Pizookie. If any of you have had that, it's incredible. They have the regular Pizookie, but then they've recently, I guess maybe in the last 15 years, since it's been so long since I've eaten there, but the triple chocolate Pizookie is just out of this world delicious. And Lisa helped me. I think she took 3 bites, but anyway, it was just very, very, very enjoyable. We ate it at restaurants that we knew. You know, some people like to go to the local restaurants that you wouldn't know about. We get excited about chain restaurants. That's what it is. But anyway, we had a wonderful feast. Usually we go to Walmart Supercenter like 5 or 6 times during the feast as we're restocking with just the 2 of us and all this eating out. We only went to Walmart once the entire feast. It was unbelievable. I went to one other grocery store and was walking, and it was H-E-B, and all of a sudden I felt this person kind of come up behind me and put the arm around me, kind of in my lower back, and I thought, my wife is not with me. And I looked, and it was Edgar Paz. Came out of nowhere. He will attest to this. But I didn't know if he realized with my quick reflexes and my Taekwondo skills what could have happened to him if I had not been of a right millennial mindset. But anyway, so it's good to see Mr. Paz there at H-E-B. But beyond that, we didn't really go to that many grocery stores. But we enjoyed great food. We really rejoiced in that. We had a really serene view at our condo. We were along the Comal River in the downtown part of New Braunfels. We had a little porch out the back that was up about 25, 30 feet that looked down upon the Comal River, and there were hummingbirds flying in and out to the hummingbird feeder. There were squirrels going crazy. There were deer on the other side in a nice open green area that we saw every morning. We saw fish. We saw turtles. Probably the most interesting wildlife that we saw were the tubing mammals going down the Comal River in all different shapes and sizes. But many human beings enjoying that experience, which was also a delight, just to be there in that serene environment. We had many experiences at the feast that we enjoyed. The Comal tubing river ride was quite a treat, much more of an adventurous experience than we had anticipated. I'll leave it at that, but it was a very, very enjoyable day. One night, the last night after the last great day, we went to the Tower of the Americas. How many of you have been to the Tower of the Americas in San Antonio? Anyway, there's a restaurant at the top called the Chart House, and I don't know how many stories that is above ground, probably 40 or 50. But you go up this needle, and then there's a rotating restaurant up top that we ate there right at about sunset. And as it rotated, and we enjoyed an incredible meal. And seeing the vista of all of San Antonio was just a real treat. And then our third big treat that Lisa and I personally, again, this is our quirkiness coming out, turn to Ecclesiastes 11. Ecclesiastes 11 does not have to do with our quirkiness. It's where we're going here eventually. But when we go out of town and we kind of have some downtime on a Saturday night, we get very excited because there's a good chance that Lawrence Welk might be on the PBS channel. Because Lawrence Welk is not shown here in Dallas, and it really upsets me. But we for years, we love to watch Lawrence Welk. I don't think anybody on the Lawrence Welk show has ever sinned during that show while it shows. But it's just great music, great dancing, and it's just a very positive. We love that show anyway. But so we watched Lawrence Welk on the first Saturday night, and then on the last Saturday night during the feast, we watched Lawrence Welk. They went to Paris. It was a night in Paris, and the Lennon Sisters sang, and it's all very, very good. Anyway, but it's just very, very enjoyable experience. You can see that the Burnetts are not that adventurous, but anyway, we had a wonderful, wonderful feast and great experiences that we particularly enjoyed as a family. I met some incredible people. I met this family from Barbados. I know I talked to somebody who went to Barbados this year at the feast, but we met this family, Wesley, Velma, and Imani. I don't remember their last name. Maybe Holland, I think, might be their last name, but they're in Mr. Hampton's area there in Barbados, and just a wonderful, wonderful, loving family that we just really enjoyed getting to know. He was really stressed. Well, they both were stressed. The wife, as the backseat driver, was extremely stressed about his driving in a country where there are multiple lanes. She said, we just have one road, and people go this way and they go this way. It's very simple, but it's not that way in Texas. But they survived as well, and they like to travel to the States and meet various brethren, so really enjoyed them. We met a lot of people actually from some other organizations who came to the feast there in New Braunfels because it was closer, or for various reasons they were unable to go to their site, and had some very good conversations with them. I had one interesting conversation with a lady who's been in the church for many years. I think many of you know Mr. Bald, Mr. Jim Bald, who served faithfully in the ministry for many years until his death. I gave a message on the last great day talking about just the way that life begins as we look at life itself, and we understand that life begins at conception when the sperm meets the egg. That life again begins, flows down the fallopian tube, and then lands in the uterus and settles there while the gestation process goes. And then just talking about the development of that embryo. And research shows that at around 4 weeks after conception, there's already a heartbeat that is going, that is pounding. And this little baby is forming, and a variety of other things that are happening. The brain is splitting into the 5 different sections, and all these things are occurring just at 4 weeks. So I was talking about that, and then reflecting on this great God who has allowed some 80 billion to 100 billion or more to live on this earth, and that he knows each one of them, and my belief, even with all of the miscarriages and the abortions that have occurred, that those, at least as far as I can tell, those also are lives that have existed and have died, and that those lives will be brought to life again, because God, who is the God of life, is looking forward to bring these individuals to life as well. Well, Nancy Bald came up to me after services and said, I want to show you a scripture. I don't know if you've read it before. I always get a little nervous when people say that, thinking, okay, all right, did I really mess up on something and they're going to straighten me out, or what's going on? So she had to go to lunch, as did we. And then she came back, and we found each other just after services. And she said, it's in Ecclesiastes 11, verse 4. Ecclesiastes 11, verse 4. And I'll read it first here in the New King James Version. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. Of course, we understand that. It looks like could be this. I guess I better not do anything today. We are to be people of action. Verse 5 then says, as you do not know what is the way of the wind, or how the bones grow in the womb of her who is with child, so you do not know the works of God who makes everything. And she said, as you read that, she said, what's your margin say? Well, I looked at wind, and wind in my margin says spirit. And then she said, my husband liked to quote from the New American Standard Bible a lot. So she said, I've got that Bible here. And she said, look at my Bible and look at the marginal reference for that. And it says this, just as you do not know the path of the wind, or as her margin states, or with many manuscripts, just as you do not know how the Spirit enters the bones in the womb of a pregnant woman. Think about that. If that's what that scripture is actually saying, you've got this term here, wind, which can be spirit, to reflect upon the spirit of man. When that comes in to the human being that is growing inside this womb, just as we cannot tell exactly when that happens, what's that saying? That's saying that life, for those that look at abortion as, no, it's not life until they actually come out of the womb and are breathing before they're considered alive. No, when even the spirit of man enters the womb. So I just thought, wow, this was really interesting having this conversation with Mrs. Bald. There are Mr. Bennett was talking about the experiences that we have at the feast. Some of my most memorable experiences are talking with God's people about God's Word and hearing their insights of what they've read and studied. And I had just never looked at that passage from that perspective as I did that day. I mean, that is to me, that's one of the proofs that the spirit of man is in the womb from a very, very early age as that person is existing. Again, what happened with John the Baptist when Elizabeth came up beside Mary when she was pregnant with Jesus? He leapt in the womb. The Tanakh reads, just as you do not know how the life breath passes into the limbs within the womb of the pregnant woman. That new baby is breathing. It is breathing on its own while it's in that womb. So you cannot foresee the actions of God who causes everything to happen. Wonderful experiences in talking with God's people at the feast. Met a fellow from Oregon this year who was there for the feast. Interesting individual. He had been around a while. He said, I think it was back in the 50s, he said, I was riding with my father in a truck down this Oregon road, and he said this man was on the side of the road by his vehicle, and he was out of gas standing there. So he said, I guess his dad said, we'll stop and pick him up. So they stop and pick up this fellow. And of course, these two, the man and his son that picked up the fellow on the road were I think, Church of God Seventh-day Sabbath keepers. Well, they picked up this guy, and the guy started talking with them, and they shared some common experiences church-wise, and he began talking about the holy days. And he said, when I was growing up, I thought my dad knew everything. He knew it all in religion. And he said, this guy's in the truck now, and he's starting to talk about the holy days. My dad never told me about the holy days, and it was really, really making sense. Well, of course, you know who that individual was that had run out of gas. It was Mr. Herbert Armstrong. And so that was his first experience with the truth and with respect to the understanding of the holy days. And not long after that, as they were very interested, as his father became very interested in what this fellow who had run out of gas had to say, the fellow incidentally did not run out of gas in terms of the truth and talking about God's way of life. That fellow lived a very long life filled with God's Spirit, teaching many, many people. Well, anyway, this individual talked about attending Belknap Springs at the very first feast site. And I thought, man, this is really cool. I'm here at the feast in New Braunfels hearing this little story behind the scenes of how this person came in contact with Mr. Armstrong. Seeing folks there at the feast this year who had a deep, deep desire to be at the feast despite severe health problems was very, very inspiring. Again, I'm not saying anything negative about those of us here in our congregation who were unable to attend the feast. Things happen to where we are unable to, and sometimes the best decision is to stay home and do the best you can with the material that you can. But I got to see, as I mentioned at the feast, I stood behind Mr. Ken McIntosh, who's in the Fort Worth congregation, who's battling cancer and had come to the feast and was being fed with a feeding tube while he was at the feast because he couldn't keep anything down or digest anything through the mouth besides baby food. And he's there worshiping God at the feast, singing to the best of his ability despite the challenges that he faced. I talked with him this past week, and he asked if I would to pray for him with his mouth and his throat because it really hurts as he's battling cancer. But just very inspiring to see folks like that. I think of Mr. Lindsay, who's hanging out there in the back, that it's very difficult for him, Mrs. Knight, very difficult for these individuals to be able to function and have the strength every Sabbath to be at services, and to see them there was very, very inspiring. I met a man at the feast I had never met before, who was there, and he had known an individual about whom I spoke in my sermon, so he said he felt like he needed to come up and talk with me. And we talked for about 25 minutes, but in the course of discussing everything about his life and all the events, positive and negative, that had occurred in his life, he said, and incidentally, I have terminal leukemia. He said, I was supposed to die last year. He said, I may look like I'm in pretty decent health, but I'm dying, and I don't know how much longer I'll have left. I have regrets in this life, things that I would have liked to have been able to do that I was unable to do, but I am extremely blessed to be given God's way of life and to be here at the feast and to share that with all of you. Tremendous, tremendous examples out there of individuals who have battled different things and are staying faithful. It's hard work for some to get to the feast. It's hard work for some who go to the feast to look after others at the feast. That can be a tremendous burden to look after others who are very, very needy, but they do that. It's not like when I was a kid. I remember, we were not rich folks. We considered ourselves middle income. We were probably lower middle income. But when it came to the feast and the tenth of our income, we just lived like kings. I would say for the most part, I'm not speaking of everyone here, but I would say probably for the most part that's not the case now. We live very well. I think of the beds that we sleep in, the comfort that we have in our beds, the food choices that we're able to have during the year. Sure, I eat Honey Nut Cheerios during the year, but at the feast I eat Captain Crunch. I really take it up. But for the most part, and I finished off that Captain Crunch this morning, and it was one of those bowls where you pour and it's really kind of filling up, but I really don't have enough for another bowl, so I just pour it up, and then you get all the little crumbs on the top. Oh, it's very good, very good. But I finished that off today, so that was my last feast experience. But we really do, for the most part, again, I'm not speaking of everybody, but we do pretty much now live at a pretty high level in this nation, in this particular nation. Not so across the globe, but we experience that there, and it is, for some, especially as we get older, it is a major thing to go to the feast, and some of us realize that we're just barely getting by health-wise in the state that we are in the comforts of our home, and for some it's just not possible for them to go to the feast. Others that go on limited incomes, and it's just very, very difficult. And I talked with several this feast who it was a major sacrifice for them to be able to go physically, just to be there. But they said, we have to be there. We have to be there to be with God's people. So we make great sacrifices for that. And they're very glad that they did. How did God intervene in you for you in some way this feast? Was there a way that you can think that God intervened in different ways in terms of your prayers? What kinds of things happened? Did any miracles happen this feast? I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. I did hear of one miracle today. Mrs. Becky Blado up in the Sherman congregation said that she was at Estes Park, and at one point she had wanted to take a picture of something. So she had one of these, what are those bags, packs that you wear around with? She keeps all of her money and everything in it. She took that off and set that down on a rock, and she had seen a man off in the distance that looked kind of strange, but she just thought, okay. Anyway, then she went over and took this beautiful picture of this vista, turned around, and her bag with all of her money, all of her credit cards, everything was gone. And she thought, oh, and she must have really taken a long time to take this picture. But anyway, she looked and it was gone. And she thought, oh, no, I got to get back into the hotel. I don't even have the key. No, she had the key with her. She got the key to get back into the hotel, but she didn't have any way to contact anybody or anything. Finally, she got somebody that would help her call, and she got to calling everybody, and her son wired some money to her, but she couldn't get the money because she didn't have her identification to get the money. So somebody that she had met said, I will sign for this. Got the money to him. He turned it over and gave it to her, so she had some cash. But then she started trying to call all the credit card companies and everything to try to cancel everything, and she had gotten that done. She went back to her hotel, went to bed, and the next morning woke up. And she had pretty Spartan surroundings, and the table, the one lone table there in her room, had the bag in it with everything was there. And she said, Mr. Burnett, I don't have Alzheimer's. I did set that down on the rock, and it was gone. And there it was, that it just appeared. So anyway, she was thinking of the angel that had worked out a deal and what that interaction between that angel and that individual may have been to get that back. I heard of a story one time of a person in the city who had been robbed by someone, and the guy robbed him and then took off running, and he thought, oh, man, I lost all my money. And then not long after that, he saw the guy running again, and the guy was sprinting towards him, and he thought, man, the guy just took my money. Why is he coming back at me? And the guy came and he said, here, please take everything that I took from you. Here, take it back. Something is after me, and I don't know what it is, but I'm giving this to you. And he gave it to him and left. So things happen, and that was a Miss Blado. I said Miss Becky Blado. That's her daughter. Paulette Blado had that intervention. In what way did God intervene for you this feast? What challenges did you face? Did you have health challenges? Did you have other challenges interacting with family, or just things that were going to be difficult? Let's turn to Hebrews 12. What challenges did you face? Our challenges have been higher in some years and lower in other years. This year was a fairly low level of stresses and challenges that we faced. For me personally, it's always extremely stressful preparing messages. We get this letter usually and a webinar from Ministerial Services, and I got to be very careful because I've got several bosses who are here today. But we get the memos prior to the feast about. Now remember, the feast is a very, very important time. God's people are coming together. You really take time prayerfully on your knees, plan your messages, and realize that this is the key time of year, so we really need to make sure that we're prepared and we're kind of on our best. We're at the best of our game. Like I didn't know that. Like I'm not feeling stressed already. But anyway, but it is true. I mean, we do need that. We need that encouragement to stay focused and directed on what we need to be saying. And you don't want to mess up at the feast. I think I just messed up by saying that right there. But you don't want to mess up at the feast. You really want to make sure that what you say is accurate and correct, interesting and engaging. And you have to just work hard, and you pray for God to be involved in your message and in the others' messages, and you got to keep from getting all focused in on yourself and give of yourself in that way. And God works it out. He works it out every year. And I looked at the series of messages that we had this year at New Braunfels, and it was just, I felt it laid out one of the more beautiful pictures of the coming rule of Jesus Christ that I've had in years. What were the challenges that you faced? Remember, what are your 5 words? Are you thinking about your 5 words? Are you getting any closer to your 5 words to sum up the feast? What about financially? Were there some tithing lessons that you learned this feast? I talked to one family who came to me and said, for years we just really have not second tithed like we should. We just didn't do it. We would kind of put some money aside and then see what we had savings-wise just to kind of make it work, and it was just always a challenge. Some years were pretty okay. Other years were disastrous. But we came to realize last year we've got to second tithe faithfully. And they said this year we have had an abundance. We have been abundantly blessed, even to the point that we were able to help someone else in financial difficulties with funds because we had so much, because they tithed faithfully. And they lived that lesson in a negative way for years and continued to battle that, and then finally really got that down, and they saw the result of it as God blessed that. Maybe your tithing lesson was not as positive. Some who labor, and we know we've talked about this before, about how you second tithe based on your work efforts, but some who labor don't save second tithe faithfully. Some save it and then borrow from it throughout the year as they get in a pinch and hope that things are going to pay off later to where they can pay that back. And as we've said many times, folks who have done that, and I can tell you that as a minister for a few years now, and talk to any minister here among us that has counseled individuals in that situation. Folks that do that tend to have recurring problems. You just have recurring problems with that over and over again because it's a test commandment. But did we learn anything from that this year? What did we learn this feast? Hebrews 12. One of the things that I took away from the feast this year dealt with this passage in particular that was read during the feast about what we were doing. We as God's people have this interaction with God at a level that is beyond anything that ancient Israel had. And then the feast represented this time where not only do we understand spiritually that we're able to come before God in this kind of a relationship, to come into His house on a daily basis as we pray to Him and as He gives us His words through the Bible. And not only as we go through that is that important, but when we go up to the feast, it's like He says, come into my house. Come into my house here and let me teach you. Verse 18, you've not come to the mountain that may be touched, that burned with fire, to blackness and darkness and tempest, all the things that ancient Israel had when the law was given to Israel. Verse 21, and so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I'm exceedingly afraid and trembling. But he said, no, it's even a step up, and not a step up, but multiple times stepped up to what we experience. We know this passage, but this is what we experience this feast, physically and spiritually. But you've come to Mount Zion, you've come to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You've come to this innumerable company of angels. You've come to the general assembly of the church of the firstborn who are registered in heaven. You've come to God. You've come to the judge of all, to the spirits of just men made perfect. You've come before Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant, and to the blood of sprinkling that speaks better things than that of Abel. See that you don't refuse him who speaks. As we came to his house this year and heard his ways and his plan taught to us again. For if they didn't escape who refused him who spoke on earth, how much more shall we not escape, the ones who have been given this infinitely higher calling than what physical Israel was given in their lives? Shall we not escape if we turn away from him who speaks from heaven, whose voice then shook the earth? But now he's promised, saying, yet once more I shake not only this earth, but also heaven. Now this yet once more indicates the removal of those things that are being shaken as of things that are made, that the things which cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom, we are receiving this kingdom which cannot be shaken. Let us have grace by which we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear. For our God is a consuming fire. We came before God with deep reverence for Him, to fear Him and have awe of Him and reverence for His way of life as we worship Him and obey Him. And in doing so, we also, let's go to Zephaniah 3. This is a passage to which I turned during one of my messages at the feast, one that lists a little snippet or a little trinket of truth that had slipped by me before in studying the minor prophets. Well, actually, no, that one's coming up in a bit. This one did too. This one did too, because I hadn't thought about this in this way. Did I say Zephaniah? I meant Zechariah. Zechariah 8. Zechariah 8, you probably heard this read this year at the feast about God in verse 2 saying, I am zealous for Zion. God emotionally and in His zeal is very zealous for Zion, with great zeal, with great fervor, with great heat, and driven like behavior. With great fervor, He's zealous for her. And then he talks about the city of truth that Jerusalem will be called in every aspect. And then look at verse 4. Was that read this year at your feast site? It was in ours. And then as you think about that, and as we heard different messages of verses 4 and 5, as we heard those different messages this year at the feast, and the way in which the ministry explained those, of what that might be like, then I saw the other verse that was right beside that, right after that talks about how God views this. And this is what I hadn't really settled on before, and it kind of jumped out at me this feast. Thus says the Eternal of hosts, if it's marvelous in the eyes of the remnant of this people in these days, and what's he say? Will it also be marvelous in my eyes? Think about it from my perspective, God is saying. Think about it from how I view it, the God of eternity who has seen all of the good and the bad of life, who has seen all of Satan's involvement and how he's skewed things down through the years. What do you think it's going to be like for me? The one who is life, the one who is truth, the one who loves all of mankind, who loves Israel, who loves his people, the one who loves the Israel of God now when I change them to rule alongside me. Do you think, what do you think about me? Do you think it's going to be marvelous in my eyes? You bet it's going to be marvelous in my eyes. It's going to be incredible in my eyes, says the Lord of hosts. And thinking about that, I just reflected upon, we serve a great God who is as eager or even more eager than we can even hope to be for this time to take place. Okay, so let's talk about the takeaway. Here are my 5 words describing my feast experience. They're mine. I'm not saying they have to be yours. I'm saying they're mine. And yours may be different. Again, based on what you experienced, I think my words would probably be different in another year. Here were mine for this year. Let's go to the verse that I discovered this feast, Zephaniah 3. Zephaniah 3. My first word describing my feast experience would be calming. And now, bear with me on this, slash. I didn't tell you could have a slash, but I'm in charge, so you can have a slash. Calming / tranquil. Tranquil. See, that's very close. So I get the slash. I am entitled to the slash. So calming / tranquil. Again, we really missed having Christy with us at the feast. But it is interesting how with just the two of you, we're going here and there and here, and I like going here and there. I like action and I like all kinds of activity, but we didn't have as much of that, and it sounds like we were finally calm and tranquil because Christy wasn't with us. That's not the case. We really love having Christy with us at the feast because it is calming and tranquil with Christy. But it was a different kind of calming and tranquil this feast. really, really were able to relax and enjoy the feast, and we always do that. But at this level, at this feast, it particularly was that. We had our time in the morning to just sit out and enjoy the coffee on the porch and see the wildlife around us and settle in each day and just relax and have the evenings to relax. And even the visiting with the brethren at the feast was very calm and tranquil. I've got to admit to you, in the last, probably, basically since 1995, there are years at the feast when you get together with certain individuals, or certain individuals seem to seek you out, that you walk away from the conversation thinking, what is this person even doing here? You know, the way they talk and the way that they say this and that, I don't even know that they want to be here with us. I don't even know that they even get it. And again, you know, every year at the feast, I see God's people who are living God's way of life, and am very energized by that. But at the same time, there have been feasts where there have been quite a few people that I've thought, I don't know if this person gets it. I don't know if this person is even a part of us, because of the vile and just things that were coming out of their mouths that were not what we stand for and what truth we have. And this feast, I especially experienced that in New Braunfels with the people there. It was just very, very peaceful, settled, calming, tranquil feast site. Zephaniah 3, verse 14, kind of speaks to what we'll experience in the millennium in this respect. As the millennium continues, he says in verse 14, "Sing, O daughter of Zion, shout, O Israel, be glad and rejoice with all your heart, O daughter of Jerusalem. The Lord has taken away your judgments. He's cast out your enemy. The King of Israel, the Eternal, is in your midst." Jesus Christ is there. He's there ruling from the throne. "You shall see disaster no more." What will that be like for mankind to hear that said and to recognize the truth of that, and that will actually come to pass as they are protected and looked after? You're not going to see disaster happen again. Verse 16, "In that day it shall be said to Jerusalem, do not fear. Zion, let not your hands be weak. Be about the business of work." We've got things to do. We've got challenges to face and accomplish as the millennium begins and builds. And then verse 17 is the passage that I had not reflected upon until seeing that this year. "The Lord your God, the eternal your God in your midst, the mighty one will save. He will rejoice over you with gladness." Christ himself will be there rejoicing over the people. He's rejoicing over the people as he's interacting with them, and he's doing it with great gladness. And then look what it says next. "He will quiet you with his love." What will that be like for Israel as they're brought back to Jerusalem and God begins working with them, that he quiets them with his love? I mean, I'm not trying to be a touchy-feely kind of person here. We all know what it is like to be quieted with love. There is nothing more comforting than to be quieted with love, be it from your spouse, be it from your children, be it from the parent to the child as he quiets, or as the mother quiets her son or daughter with their love. And then the part that I had not seen was this: "He will rejoice over you with singing." This calming and this tranquil effect will be, I guess, the icing on the cake will be this great being, Jesus Christ, who is perfection of perfection, will begin singing to his people. What will that be like? What will that be like for the person who created music and everything that is beautiful and everything that is good in all his perfection, singing to his people and rejoicing over them? How many of you have had moms who would sing to them at night or feel that comfort there? Just to imagine what that is going to be like, and the calming, tranquil effect of that kind of an environment is very difficult to grasp at this point in life, but it will happen. The second word for me, besides calming / tranquil, is connected. I felt, as I mentioned just briefly before, a tremendous sense of connection to my wife, to my family, and to the church this feast in a greater way than I have before. And I have had some feasts that I felt very, very connected with God's people. This year, I especially felt connected. Mr. Burnett mentioned Malachi 3, a great passage that speaks to that. Let's go to Colossians 2. Did you walk away from the feast feeling more connected with God's people? Colossians 2 is another verse that speaks to what is possible with us as Christians, to the degree that we make that a desire of ours and pray and study and fast and truly seek to experience that and give of ourselves in that way. Give and it will be given back to you, pressed down and flowing over. Colossians 2, verse 1, he says, I want you to know what a great conflict I have for you and those in Laodicea, and for as many as have not seen my face in the flesh, that their hearts, this is what his desire is, that their hearts may be encouraged, that their hearts being knit together in love, and attaining to all the riches of the full assurance of understanding, to the knowledge of the mystery of God, both the Father and of Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. There is something about being together with God's people and hearing the treasures, the hidden mysteries of God, and the feast days are that. To hear that and get it completely locked down in that mind again, and then not only to hear that at services, but then to talk about that and interact with folks at levels that we just often don't get the chance to do in other circumstances, and what that gives us at the feast. I felt that this feast. The third one, let's go to Exodus 32. Exodus 33. Let's go back there. Exodus 33. You have at different times through study and messages little things, lights that turn on, and this was literally a light that turned on for me that I had not thought of before. But the third walk-away word that I got from the feast this year was depth. Depth. One of the things that we've been encouraged to do by the ministerial services. In our workshops and various things are continue to peel back the truth of God and go deeper and deeper to the deeper and deeper layers of God's way of life. It's not necessarily going out and trying to find new truth that some just have a hunger and a thirst for, that is actually in some degrees for some a lust for. It's not, and that which can get them in out on limbs and they fall off and they get hurt very badly. But it's more of an understanding of the depth of God's way of life. And as we keep the feast year after year, we begin to understand the meaning of these days with greater and greater depth. And that's what happened on many occasions this feast for me. But one such was a message that I heard that spoke to this. And you may read this and you say, I knew that, Burnett, I knew that. You didn't understand that? Okay, I admit I did not understand it to the depth that I do now. But Exodus 33 discusses the situation of Moses meeting with the Eternal, meeting with Yahweh, meeting with the one who was to become Jesus Christ as he interacted with him. Verse 7, Moses took his tent and pitched it outside the camp, far from the camp, and called it the tabernacle of meeting. And it came to pass that everyone who sought the Eternal went out to the tabernacle of meeting, which was outside the camp. So it was, whenever Moses went out to the tabernacle, that all the people rose, and each man stood at his tent door and watched Moses until he had gone into the tabernacle. Okay, verse 9. So it came to pass when Moses would enter that tabernacle, then the pillar of cloud descended and stood at the door of the tabernacle, and the Eternal talked with Moses. Now remember what we read in Hebrews 12? About what we come before Mount Zion, and we come before God in this situation. So So this it came down and met there with him. All the people saw this happening, verse 10, saw this pillar of cloud standing at the tabernacle of door, and all the people rose and worshiped, each man in his tent. So the Lord spoke to Moses face to face as a man speaks to his friend. So God interacted with him in that way. Now, again, we don't hear God literally talking to us, but we come before him and we talk to him through prayer, and he talks to us through study. And the degree to which we delve into that deeper and deeper and focus on that in our lives, we develop that friendship with God. He spoke to Moses as a friend speaks to his friend. So he would return to the camp, but his servant Joshua the son did not depart from the tabernacle. Okay, so verse 12, it says, Moses said to the Eternal, you say to me, bring up this people, but you've not let me know whom you will send with me. Yet you have said, I know you by name, and you also have found grace in my sight. So I'm praying this, if I have found grace in your sight, he's saying to God here, show me now your way, that I may know you and that I may find grace in your sight. And consider that this nation is your people. Verse 14, so he said, this is what God says to him, my presence will go with you, and I'll give you rest. So he said to him, if your presence does not go with us, don't bring us up from here. For how will then it be known that your people, that I found grace in your sight, except you go with us? So he says in verse 17, the Lord said to Moses, I will also do this thing for you that you have spoken, for you have found grace in my sight, and I know you by name. He said, verse 18, here's the question, please show me your glory. Okay, so verse 19, then he said, and we know this passage here, but what God says is, I will make my goodness pass before you. I didn't think about that before. That was one that I'd never really considered that. When we think about that, when he starts talking about what I'm going to do, I'm going to go by you, and remember, I'm going to put my hand in front of that little cleft in the rock, and then as I pull my hand away, you're going to see my back. As I read that, and as I've read that over and over, I think of, my mind immediately goes to the brightness, God in his incredible spirit being that he is so bright that if he turned and we saw his face, we'd die. We'd be dead men. So we can't see that and live. But I did not understand the depth of this passage before. He says, I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim the name of the Eternal before you. I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But he said, you cannot see my face, for no man shall see me and live. So the Eternal said, here's a rock, here's a place, and you stand on the rock, and it shall be while my glory passes by, that I will put you in the cleft of the rock, as I've already read, and show you my back. So let's go down to verse 34, chapter 34 then, and read verse 5. Now the Eternal descended in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Eternal. Verse 6, and the Lord passed before him and proclaimed. And what did he say? He said, the Eternal God, merciful and gracious, long-suffering, abounding in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, by no means clearing the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and the children's children to the third and fourth generation. And what the minister brought out in that message was something that I had not considered. I always thought about that as being just the brightness of God, and that we'll shine like that same brightness. But that's not the essence of it. The essence goes deeper than that. Look again at verse 19. I will make all my goodness pass before you. What that shining is, it's not that God is just spirit. And I got to be careful about how to word this, because I don't want to in any way diminish God. Spirit is God is the creator of all. He is spirit being. But what I see it getting at here, it's not just that spirit has this brightness. It is the glory of the goodness of God. The goodness, his mercy, his compassion, his everything that abounds, the graciousness, the long-suffering, all of these components of the essence of the fruit of the Spirit, all these components of the goodness of God, that's what shines forth like incredible brightness. And as Mr. Bennis talked about, as we live our lives now and we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we're walking through the challenges that we face in life, but the goodness of God, the brightness of His glory and of everything, His graciousness, His compassion, all of these attributes of God are so bright and beautiful that as they come into us, then God illuminates our path by His goodness and His greatness and His merciful kindness and graciousness, that we can see the way. And we, as we reflect that, the goodness of God, the mercy of God as His representatives, we shine to others. Again, I had not grasped the depth of that, of the goodness of what gives that light to the degree that I did by the way that he covered that. So depth. What depth did you experience this feast? Number 4, as we begin to wrap things up here. I was energized. I was energized in some ways more than ever. And in many years, I've been very energized. This again, was a very energizing feast for me, spiritually and emotionally. I felt refreshed, and I also felt commissioned. Mr. Horchak gave a message, the final message on the last great day, and made this statement: we are part of the greatest humanitarian work known to man. And there are many out there, many worthy causes, Doctors Without Borders, Red Cross, United Way, Shriners, all of the different ones that are out there that try to do good. But think about what we are a part of, the greatest humanitarian work known to man. We stand as the link, he said, we stand as the link from this evil world that now exists to the coming kingdom where Jesus Christ will sit on His throne and rule from Jerusalem. We're the link between that. We're the ones who are here in that world now. We represent the link as God uses us to help man go from here to there. What a wonderful blessing that we have. We've got a mission to do. We're a kingdom of God ambassadors is what we are. We're striving to shine that reflection of God's goodness and His grace and His glory out to mankind as we interact with them. Part of a group whose commission is to declare that coming kingdom that will solve this world's ills that this world cannot solve, with the only answer to mankind's ills. But he also made mention in his message that the feast doesn't go on for 4 weeks. It doesn't go on for 40 days. It doesn't go on for a year. It goes on for 7 days, and we have the last great day. Why is that? Because God wants us to leave. He wants us to leave the feast. He wants us to go home because there's work to be done. There's work to be done. There's work to be done in our families. There's work to be done in our marriages. There's work to be done in our relationship with God. There's work to be done in our jobs, that we can be ethical and set an example of God's way of life. There's work to be done for God's people in service to God's people. There's work to be done in getting the message of the gospel out to the world. There's work to be done in living the gospel as we interact with those in and outside the church trying to emulate Christ. That's the action step from the messages that we heard as Mr. Burnett talked about. The fifth and final point and the final scripture today is Deuteronomy 4. Let's go there. Deuteronomy 4. At least this was my final word. Deuteronomy 4, verse 5. Let's read it first. Deuteronomy 4, verse 5, as they're getting ready to go into the land to which they were to inherit. Moses is talking to them, telling them to listen to the statutes and the judgments that he's teaching you, that I am teaching you, which God is giving you. And he says, dropping down in verse 5 now, surely I've taught you statutes and judgments, just as the eternal my God commanded me, that you should act according to them in the land which you go to possess. Verse 6, therefore be careful to observe them. This is your wisdom. This is your understanding in the sight of the peoples who will hear all these statutes and say, surely this nation is a wise and understanding people. These people who are the Israel of God, who represent God and His coming kingdom, these people are wise. They have understanding. Well, it's from observing the statutes and seeking to understand them and gaining that wisdom that comes with that. And then verse 7 makes this statement, as we've read many times over the years, and we still marvel in our own lives as we think of our calling. For what great nation is there? What great nation? What great nation now, the Israel of God, the new covenant Israel of God, who have received God's Holy Spirit. What great nation is there that has God so near to it as the Lord our God is to us, for whatever reason we may call upon him? My last word is just appreciative. I thought about the experience this year, all the aspects of keeping the feast, and what I was reminded of what I've been given, and what the love that God has for me and for all of mankind, and just the absolute miracle of our calling now in this world, that God has called us now, that miracle has taken place. What our value to God is and what he expects of us. Mr. Mike Machen gave a sermonette at the feast speaking of their daughter that they lost to Crohn's disease, and just going through that, and then in missing her, but at the same time in looking upon her life. He said, we can sometimes think of ourselves as being one in God's eyes. We're one in 100 billion or 110 billion, however many have lived. That's how we see ourselves. And while that is true, we are one, and we are part of the family, in a sense, of mankind. He says, but in God's eyes, we are one of one. You are one of one. You are you. You are unique. God has created you uniquely. There is no one else, or will never be anyone else in this world who will be just like you. You are one of one in God's eyes. You are very valuable to him. Don't be an underachiever. Don't minimize what God has done for you and the blessing of that calling. Appreciate it deeply and do something with it. Do something with it. Here we are. We're coming out of the feast. What are we going to do with what we know? How are we going to apply that? How are we going to springboard to continue on our journey through the challenges that we face? So what's your takeaway from this feast? Do you need to reevaluate your takeaway? Is it possible to change your takeaway for the better? Absolutely. What did you do right this feast? Did you mess up? Did you sin a few times? Did you make some mistakes? Did you hurt anybody by something you said at the feast? Were you able to get that worked out? What did we learn from the experience? Have you and your family, or for those of you who do not have family in the church, have you and your church family, have close friends, have you talked about these experiences of the feast? What have you learned? What were the pluses and minuses of this feast? What were the goods, the bads, the deeper understandings of the factors of God's plan, as Mr. Burnett talked about in the sermonette? What were some of those things? If you haven't done that yet with others, are you planning to do so? I hope so. I hope you are. Some of you and your families, friendships that you have, will want to do this formally. You kind of have to set aside a time to sit down, and we're going to talk about this. Some of you may work that way. Others may be much more informal in their discussions. Our family is very informal as we get together and interact. Our conversations as a family quickly morph from the physical to the spiritual, from the goofy to the sad to the hilarious, from the disheartening to the heartwarming, from the tragic to the inspiring. That's just kind of the way our family works. We're talking all the time about all kinds of things. But talk about it. Talk with your family. Give your family your time so that they can talk with you about their experiences and their takeaway with the feast. Talk with your church family. All the scriptures that I used today were passages that were quoted this year in New Braunfels at the feast. I thought about what we were instructed to do at the end of the feast, and incidentally that Mr. Burnett also instructed us to do, and thought, I need to go over these messages. I need to think about them, and I need to think about the takeaway. So I would ask you, again, what about your 5 descriptors? Mine came as a result of what I heard from the pulpit and what I experienced as I interacted with my wife and people I met and experienced all the different things as we reflected upon the feast. What are your 5 words? What are they? Have you written them down? What are they? Think about them this week. Why did you choose those particular words? How was your feast?